Okay, I was actually going to record a completely different video today than what I'm talking about now, but I feel that this is bigger than what I was going to talk about today. So I'm pushing that video back probably a couple days, if not just outright scrapping it entirely. But anyway, I don't really like the source that this comes from, but a lot of other places are also reporting on this. So I'm basically going to talk about, and the headline is coming from Cosmic Book News. Again, I don't like the source, but a lot of other sources are talking about it, and they're quoting Nielsen. RIP Star Wars, entire season of Skeleton Crew no shows Nielsen ratings. Now, what they mean by that, the headline is not very good. What they mean by that is basically Skeleton Crew did not once crack the top 10 in the Nielsen streaming ratings. If we go down here, following the Acolyte, it's R.I.P. Star Wars, as the entire season of Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus has failed to make the Nielsen ratings charts. And if you remember, I think this was about a month ago. I did a video on it at the time. It might have actually been a couple weeks ago. I don't remember exactly. But there was an article from Game Rant where they were talking about how the first two episodes of Star Wars Skeleton Crew didn't even crack the top 10 Nielsen streaming ratings when episodes 1 and 2 of Skeleton Crew came out. Unlike the Acolyte, which even though the Acolyte had lower viewing numbers than shows like Ahsoka, the Acolyte still cracked Nielsen's top 10, at least in the first week, and then the Acolyte dropped off after that week to week to week. So the fact that Skeleton Crew never even cracked the top 10 of the Nielsen ratings itself is really, really bad. And I understand that ratings are not indicative of the quality of a show, but it's a good indication as to where the Star Wars fan base is right now. But here we go. Not one episode has made it to the Nielsen charts, including the 2-episode premiere. And with all 8 episodes available, it also means no one jumped on late to binge watch the series. And there was, I do remember that Game Rant article. I'm responding to this paragraph here. I remember that Game Rant article actually saying something to that effect, that, you know, that the Nielsen ratings for the first 2 episodes aren't really that significant because, you know, you're going to have the binge watchers. Everyone's going to wait for all 8 episodes to release, and then they're going to binge it all at once. If you remember Cobra Kai season 6 part 1, when its viewing numbers were reported by Nielsen, it was in the top 10, but it was nowhere near as big as season 4 or season 5. What a lot of analysts chalked that up to was the fact that Netflix decided to release the 6th and final season of Cobra Kai into 3 parts. And so they were saying, it's going to be the binge watchers, people that are going to wait for all 15 episodes of season 6 to release, and then they're just going to binge, and then they're just going to binge the whole season from start to finish. That did not happen with Skeleton Crew, apparently. Here we go. This going back to the article. If this isn't a clear indication that fans no longer care about Star Wars, I don't know what is. They actually have a point about this. And here's the thing that I want to highlight with regards to Cosmic Book News, okay? This is their opinion of the show. Skeleton Crew actually isn't all that bad of a series. It's fun, and it's light years better than The Acolyte. However, let's be honest, Disney and Lucasfilm haven't done a good job with Star Wars, and they have a fucking point with this, okay? If we actually examine Star Wars under the tutelage of Disney, okay, you get the sequel trilogy, okay? Star Wars The Force Awakens was universally beloved for better or worse. I never liked the movie even at the time, but I digress. I was in the minority back in 2015. Okay, then you had the release of The Last Jedi where it was divisive. You either loved it or you hated it. There was zero in between. You then get to Rise of Skywalker, and the Rise of Skywalker managed to unite the Star Wars fan base in its universal hatred. Because even people that liked The Last Jedi hated Rise of Skywalker. Because you started with what was effectively a reboot of the original movie for you know, I'm not here to debate the merits of The Force Awakens. Let's just call a spade here. Star Wars The Force Awakens was effectively a reboot of the original Star Wars. You then had The Last Jedi that focused on, quote-unquote, subverting expectations. And Rian Johnson was going around in the media at the time saying that he wanted to subvert everyone's expectations. Okay, Rian Johnson successfully did that, for better or worse. You then get to Rise of Skywalker that tried to walk everything back of the subversion of expectations, which actually managed to piss everyone off. And so now you're left with what is arguably the most disjointed Star Wars trilogy ever produced. Now, I would argue that apathy did not immediately set in after Rise of Skywalker because of the release of Mandalorian Season 1. Mandalorian Season 1, I believe, came out like a few weeks before the premiere of Rise of Skywalker, and everyone saw The Mandalorian Season 1 as a really, really good show. So, again, I argue apathy did not set in. Yeah, Rise of Skywalker was universally hated, but hey, at least we have The Mandalorian Season 1. And The Mandalorian Seasons 1 and 2 were so successful that what happened? All of the movies ended up being canceled, and they all basically became Disney Plus shows. Remember that Boba Fett movie that Josh Trank was supposed to direct back in like 2016? Well, that's okay, because it's now being reworked into a Disney Plus show called The Book of Boba Fett. And at one point, The Book of Boba Fett, we're not going to tell you this, but at one point during The Book of Boba Fett, we're going to make it The Mandalorian Season 2.5. Boba Fett is effectively going to take a back seat. Now, this was back in 2021, and if you were decrying at the time that Star Wars was dead back during the release of The Book of Boba Fett, I would have written you off as completely hyperbolic, for the simple reason that every long-running franchise is eventually going to have a bad entry. It doesn't matter. Okay, I like to use the example of the James Bond movies, the official James Bond movies from Dr. No up through Die Another Day. That's from 1962 to 2002. 40 years, 20 movies. There's only four James Bond movies in that set that I consider to be bad. From Russia with Love, and mostly because From Russia with Love is largely way too convoluted for its own good. On Her Majesty's Secret Service has always been viewed as sort of the anti-James Bond movie, and people are not wrong about that. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was the longest James Bond movie for a long time, but James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service was not James Bond. The Man with the Golden Gun, that was the second outing featuring Roger Moore, was so fucking boring that it was more entertaining to watch paint dry. And then you had Octopussy that came out in '83. I don't remember the exact number. In the series. It's not that important. But with Octopussy, that movie was so ridiculous, was way too ridiculous for its own good. At one point, James Bond has to disguise himself as a clown in order to disarm a bomb. And believe you me, that was not the most ridiculous part of that movie. There was a lot more that I really don't want to get into, because I have basically avoided rewatching Octopussy for the last probably 15 years of my life, and I don't intend on ever rewatching that movie ever again. But anyway, getting back to my main point, if you were to decry that Star Wars is dead after the release of Book of Boba Fett, like I said, I would have written you off as hyperbolic because, well, every long-running franchise has a bad entry at some point. And then you get up to Mandalorian Season 3, and that's when you start to see the ratings drop significantly, and I do remember reporting on it at the time. And then Andor comes out, and everyone's throwing their hands up with Andor, why is why is no one watching Andor? Andor's actually a decent show. Even publications like IndieWire were calling it out at that time. And Tony Gilroy, the showrunner behind Andor, famously came out and said that he thought that the audience would embrace Andor and they would have to chase the critical praise. But the opposite happened. The critics embraced Andor, and the show was chasing the audience. So you start to see the downward trajectory there. But overall, Andor was seen as a very decent show. The issue with Skeleton Crew is not the quality of the show, because even the people who hate watch Star Wars were also saying that, yeah, you know, Skeleton Crew really wasn't that bad of a show. It was more fun and lighthearted. And if George Lucas were to return to Star Wars, this is probably what he would do. He would do something like, George Lucas would probably do Skeleton Crew if he were to come back to Star Wars. But what the ratings also suggest for Skeleton Crew not even cracking the top 10 is that even the hate watchers didn't tune in. Okay, you could argue that with The Acolyte, it got into the top 10 of the Nielsen streaming ratings because of hate watchers. You could argue the same thing for Andor. You could argue the same thing for Mandalorian Season 3. You could argue that for Book of Boba Fett, right? Is that, you know, hate watching is still watching. It's still ratings at the end of the day. I mean, Howard Stern, very famously, this was back in the 90s, back when Howard Stern was Howard Stern, not Howard Stern of today. I believe Howard Stern was on The Tonight Show. This was back like early 90s, like 92, 93. And he famously declared that half the people who listen to his daily radio show absolutely despise him and are just waiting for him to screw up so that they can go run and cry to his sponsors. Right? Even if you were hate listening to Howard Stern back in the early 90s, back when Howard Stern was Howard Stern, you were still a listener. You were still putting money in Howard Stern's pocket, whether you liked it or not. And that's why I never liked the concept of hate watching. But the streaming ratings for Skeleton Crew also indicate that even the hate watchers are throwing their hands up and saying, yeah, you know what? I'm done. Because Forbes came out with an article back in December 4th, 2024. The headline is, Skeleton Crew is now the best reviewed Disney Star Wars project besides Andor. The problem is, it's not just good reviews anymore that get people to watch a show. I made a video some time ago. I think it was a couple weeks ago at this point. Might have been 2-3 weeks ago. It's still on the channel. And where I basically, I think I titled it, Why No One Is Excited for Star Wars Anymore. And I made the point there, and I'm going to end the video with this because I want to end this before I drag it out for too long. So I'll end the video with this. I'll reiterate the point that I made in my video on why no one is excited about Star Wars anymore, is that now there is so much crap that has been produced since the sequel trilogy. Yes, we've had more Star Wars released under Disney than under George Lucas. But the problem is with that is that so much of the movies and the shows that have been released under Disney are either mediocre at best or at worst complete dog shit. And so what the Star Wars fandom now has to do is that they have to trudge through so much crap in order to get to the good stuff that now the effort to get to the good stuff just isn't worth it anymore. Yes, every long-running franchise, I said it before in this video, I'll say it again, every long-running franchise will inevitably have a bad entry. But when you have bad entry after bad entry after bad entry after bad entry, that usually indicates a franchise in decline. And so much so that, according to the Nielsen ratings for Skeleton Crew, even the hate watchers did not tune in to watch the show.